Okay, so I'll make a start. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second in a series of talks, events by the Critical Race and Culture Research Network, which is based at the University of the West of England. The talk last week was fascinating. It's about race and space with Xavier Baker. This week, I'm really honored to be joined by good friends of mine and, you know, on the cutting edge of their practice. So I'll be introducing those in a moment. And the format of it is that we're going to have the three speakers speaking in turn, and then we'll have opportunity for Q&A at the end. With the chat is open. Unfortunately, you're not able to unmute yourself, but at the Q&A point, if you want to unmute yourself, then and then just put up the hand signal, then I'll unmute yourself, then you can ask any questions. So just mindful of security. So for this event, I should introduce myself actually. My name's Dr. Shawn Sobers. So I'm an associate professor at the University of West of England, and the Critical Race and Culture Network, which this event is a part of, is led by myself, Emmanuel Dukwu, Amdegraph Johnson, and Xavier Baker. And it's open for independent scholars as well as university students and scholars that are looking at critical race research and topics in their inquiries. And we have another event next week, which I'll talk about a bit later. So it's really good to see you all. It's a nice sunny evening, so we'll crack on. So the three speakers I'm really pleased to be able to join with today. So Lawrence Hu, poet, filmmaker, founder of Cargo, co-founder of the People's Platform, founder of Inner City Tales, and lots of other initiatives that he'll be telling us about. Got Samenua Sesher, an arts manager, cultural producer, coach, and the director of the Museum of Colour. And also we have Michael Jenkins, filmmaker, producer, and co-founder of Black Wave, which is one of the only commercial production companies Black-led in the Southwest. So it's a real great honour to have all three of you here this evening. So the topic of this event tonight is creative arts as activism. And, you know, creative arts has a long tradition in activism, whether you're thinking about political art, you know, protest posters outside of art, even graffiti, you know, and art itself is a platform that pushes on the boundaries and asks us to really reconsider, you know, what we're looking at and raises questions. So, you know, the relationship between creative art and activism and protest and political discourse is long established. And over the last year, these things have come into sharp relief with obviously the COVID lockdowns, etc., but also Black Lives Matter protests and those things. So we've asked our speakers to reflect on these things, not only in their ongoing practice, but also how they responded to some of these elements. So I'll start with Lawrence first. So Lawrence, welcome, good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Shawn. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this talk today. No,
fantastic. Really honoured to have you here. So so we're going to do this first one. Is my camera coming up, by the way? It doesn't look like it is, but is it coming up?
No, we see you well. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, yeah, good. So to tell us, just, yeah, starting by introducing myself. Well, I remember the very first time I laid eyes on you. I don't know if you remember, but it was in Seed Cafe in St. Paul's. I was with Rob Mitchell, and we were having a conversation about Black young people in education, and you were on another table, and we're having this conversation. You joined in, and we had this. We stayed on the corner in St. Paul's for a good 2 hours after that. And that was in the late 90s, I think. I don't know if you even remember that. That's when I kind of first laid eyes on you. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you responded to this particular topic of creative arts and activism.
Okay, I just wanted to give a little bit of history of my work, and I got into poetry. I set up my first bit of poetry, did the first poetry collection back in 2006, which was accompanied by a film, which was called Inner City Tales, both were called Inner City Tales. That's why I set that company up. And it was to look at raising awareness of the issues affecting the children predominantly in the communities of St. Paul's and Easton in the inner city Bristol. The main things was looking to address was prostitution, which was outside our local primary school, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. But it seems like the city didn't want to engage or do anything about. and also around drug dealing and drug use all around the base for children, you could say. So that was the first reason why I started to use poetry to try to engage and create change. Then the following year was 2007, when Bristol was going to celebrate the abolition, the bicentenary of the abolition of the slave trade. And that's exactly how Bristol, first of all, put the narrative out. It was going to be a celebration. That triggered me. And when I looked at the work which was being presented, it looked like the same stuff that was being said when I was at school, 30 years prior. And first of all, I got triggered and got angry. And then I thought, well, actually, why don't you give your version of events and put something together to combat the standard narrative? So I did a collection then called Who Story, which I did an exhibition which was in Centre Space Gallery. It was a non-Eurocentric look at the transatlantic slave trade. So the titles of poems were An Illegal Trade, a poem called Commonwealth and Empire, which looked at what was done. And then the second half of that collection was actually starting then to look at inspiring people of African heritage, African descent. So in there was a poem about Imhotep. There's a piece in there about the Haitian Revolution. And next to that, there was 110 uprisings was what I used to illustrate to those show that it's not such a victim narrative. You know, there's a lot of strength and power that was coming on and fighting against this thing when it seemed that everybody was a victim. So that was Whose Story. I pushed that around for the next couple of years. Then in 2010, I had a lot of tragedy in my life. My younger cousin committed suicide by jumping off Clifton Suspension Bridge. 6 weeks later, my younger brother died of a drug overdose in Bath. And 4 weeks after that, my father died. So I had a lot of family stuff to deal with around at that point. I'd only done Whose Story then as an exhibition, which wasn't supported by the city in any way, the work and the narrative, what was in there. They didn't want to support the work. So before I decided to then quit poetry and quit doing what I was doing because of all the family stuff I had going on, in 2011, with my friend Chaz Golding, I published the collection Whose Story, did an exhibition at Wilder Street Gallery in St. Paul's. And then I stopped doing poetry or any work for the next 4 or 5 years. 2015, I came back, I became a creative writing tutor for Kids Company, which had established itself in Bristol. I was doing one-to-one teaching with children that were deemed to be uneducational. So I was locked in a room with one child at a time, doing a creative writing course. And at this point then I thought, is this what I want to do? Or do I still want to go back to poetry? And I felt that I could connect with more people, again, by coming out of that space, using my poetry to try to create a wider change and influence more than one child at a time. So I did a half of the Whose Story exhibition again in CYN in January 2016, but at this time what I put in was the positive examples from the Whose Story collection, so it's like Imhotep, the Revolution, Mary C. Cole, Nanny the Maroons, and a poem about Africa. And then I really got back onto the work, onto the treadmill, I suppose. But at the same time, I was still thinking that I could make this, help the city change with this work. That is when cargo started to come alive as an idea and a piece of work. And then we started working forward towards this. I came into the city, where I'd always worked outside of the city because a lot of my work has been against the police, it's been against Bristol City Council, and it's been against the institutions in the city that seem to, were very happy for my community to be suffering the way it was all the time I've lived here in Bristol. Was working through to try and get this project done. There's a lot of talk saying that it wanted to be supported, wanted to be done, but when it came to like financial investment into this narrative, so CARGO stands for Charting African Resilience, Generating Opportunities. That's what it stood for. It covers, and the project covered 400 years timeline. I thought, let's just stick with that 400 years of slavery, which we're told about all the time. But let's look at the revolutionaries, the freedom fighters, and the individuals that fought for our human and civil rights that we enjoy today, who are actually responsible for us to be sat here talking to each other right now. Absolutely. Rather than thinking of Wilberforce or some other institution, or in a sense, not to be offensive to anybody, a white face that allowed us to be in our place. This was to look at what the accomplishments and achievements of people of African heritage and African descent to put us where we are. So this was coming along in 2019, published a poetry collection, which was a collection of 12 poems, which covered this 400-year timeline. And after that, we started doing some documentary work, some film work. And then COVID came and hit. But at that same time, we were already looking to make education resources built off the poetry collection. By not being able to get certain spaces and into certain institutions, and how the work was, we decided with my partner, Chaz Golden, who's actually my business partner, because Cargo Limited is a registered company. And I'm actually talking to you all now from the Cargo Loft, which is our new office space based on Jamaica Street in Stokescroft, Bristol, which is a small production house company that we put together independently. And we're actually also working with other, currently in the city, with other artists that really inspire me, and allowing them to have a free independent space where they can make what they want. They don't have to tick a box. They don't have to fit a narrative to and add to the narrative, which a lot of the time you go into other spaces people want you to. When I was first looking at doing Cargo, people want to say, oh, what about modern slavery? What about this group? What about... No, let me just tell the story I want to tell. Yeah, I don't want to dilute it down by putting other things in there. Maybe that might help with getting funding, because there could be funding that fits for these other things. But this is an issue and a story that needs to be addressed. And I suppose, looking at just what happened with the football the other day, until racism is addressed, I've got nothing else to look at. Until my children can be treated as an equal, I've got no other work to do. My children in this city today would be 10 times more likely than somebody classed as white to be stopped by the police. Their profile is completely differently, and they're still facing the same prejudice I faced growing up. And with me being a little bit spirited and not really like being told what to do, when I kept seeing doors being shut and being told, you know, you're bad, you're no good, you can't achieve, the streets became my home. So I made my life for a long time off those corners that we ended up talking when you first met me. And the street life was my life. Around gang culture, violence. This is how I grew up. But what I didn't want is for my children to have to walk in the footsteps I walked in, because along my journey, I've lost at least 50% of the people I've known to drugs, to violence and to death. So I wanted my children to see that they can aspire to be more. And that is the purpose of doing this work. And really, that's kind of just a real quick, history to who and why and what I do is because I want my children and other children to have opportunities to be so much more than I believe I could ever be.
No, thanks. That's powerful. I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot there, and thank you for sharing that. And you're candid. Today is a kind of a significant day for some part of your work that's happened from last year. Do you want to talk about today and the significance of today?
Today's a great day. I'm gonna be a child and draw someone in onto the camera a minute, because we're out celebrating today. We've had to stop celebrating today to come here. So come over here a minute. And this is someone. The whole story will be told in a minute. Come in. This is Jen Reed, right? Now this is Jen Reed, who stood up on the plinth a year ago today. Today it was, yeah. That the statue of the slaver known as Edward Colston was replaced by a statue of a black woman dressed as a Black Panther with a fist held up high in response against and a head held high against the racist institutions and things that marred all our lives. And on this day a year ago, there she stood. We had the statue there. It was a statue I never would believe I'd see in the city of Bristol, especially on the plinth that was put there to honour a slave trader.
Obviously, as you all know, and some of you are aware of, there was lots of noise around the statue and it being erected and it going up, and you know, this thing about it being by the nameless man Mark Quinn, who happens to be white. You know, I'm very much of the opinion, if I was drowning and somebody threw me a rope and it happened to be a white man, I'm not going to tell that white man to turn around and go and get me a black man in order to save myself. So it's a lot of noise around the city, and unfortunately that noise came from black people. You know, there's a group of black women in Bristol who you know, all got together and had this discussion. I think it's the Black Girl Convention. And it was really awful to see, because these are women, you know, they're black, you know, stand together. You know, and this is something that should have been something very, very positive, which is why I chose to disengage with certain groups, because on the same book, well, actually, we're not on the same book, we're completely different pages. However, this has given me a platform to go and speak with children. Because for me, and I've always said, from you know, my husband was very instrumental in throwing Colston into the river. And we said from the get-go, as soon as that he went in, it's all about education. And that's obviously Shawn, you know, people now know that we know each other. I didn't know Lawrence Who before. However, what I did see was that Massive Attack supported something called Cargo Classroom, i.e. education. And this is how our paths have crossed. And for me, it's about education. It's about speaking to the children are the change. They are the future. I really can't be done with adults. That's fine. Everybody, they can all get on with it. But I'm interested at the grassroots. Children, they will lead the way in making that change. And about representation, community, and unity. And that's what I'm going to use that platform for, and what I have been using that platform for. You know, I've secured a book deal with I've got a publishing deal, so I can go to schools and speak with children. You know, it's a children's book based on that. So the story is on.
The story is, what's funny with it is, on the 15th of July last year, we were about to launch the media campaign for the People's Platform, and it was actually a year ago today. But in the morning, about 5:30, 5:45 in the morning, I get a text from Chaz, which shows me a press release and a picture of the January statue, the Surge of Power statue, down there, but it's got a press release underneath it. And when I first looked at it, I went, flip it, someone's beat us to the punch here. Someone's jumped in, but you know what? The statue looks wicked, that's cool. But I'm reading the press release. I get all the way down to the bottom of the press release, and at the bottom it says, any proceeds from the sale of this statue will be going towards Cargo Classroom. And I was like, what? Hang on, let me read this again. Any proceeds of a full success, because what people don't know, Cargo Classroom has been completely independently invested in. No money has come from the city council, no money's come from any of the city bodies that say they're for these causes or these things. Cargo hasn't received a penny from any of these pots, especially on the new pots that came from Black Lives Matter and all of this.
Which I can't believe. Yeah, I'm surprised they've done the work that they've done without any funding.
It hasn't received any. When you look at the administration we got in the city, you'd have thought that's something that's actually been now internationally recognised. We're partnered with the National Education Union. The only two people they partnered with, the Runnymede Trust and the Hamilton Commission, which is Lewis Hamilton's Commission to Face Racism. We've been invited to the United Nations to give talks. The work is being delivered around the globe. Just the other, about a month ago, what was beautiful is we were contacted from a teacher in South Africa who had actually taken pictures and was actually using Cargo Classroom in her class. So in a sense, we're children of diaspora, but the work from the children of diaspora has gone back home and is now educating, teaching the children back home of who they can be, because they are being even more colonized than we are. Yeah, and this is what's going on, and you're thinking, here we are, and you know, me and Chaz Golden, we're as Bristol as you could really be. I've been here since I was 3 years old. Chaz has been here since he was about 6. We're both, in a sense, you want to use those terms, black men who own an independent black company making work for education, but in certain aspects in the city we can't be supported, but globally we are being supported. So if we were only looking to make it in Bristol, we'd be starving. But we decided Cargo would be a global product. We've gone out sort of, and that's where it's gone. The poetry, some of the work was used in Samuel L. Jackson's latest documentary series, Enslaved. Yeah, he came to Bristol. I worked with him there personally for over the weekend and a little bit of time and correspondence. The poetry, the poem, the Bristol trade was used in that. This documentary has actually taken Cargo and my work globally. It has won numerous awards around the world, but for some reason, certain faces in certain spaces in the city can't recognise this work. Am I going to name it? I'm not interested in them no more.
You know,
the thing is, a year ago,
See you, Jen.
a year ago, I was upset, and I've been really upset with it not being recognised. But what we did is we just kept our foot on the pedal, kept delivering, kept doing the work, and the work. And what I like now is that the work's got its recognition without certain individuals being involved in it that should have been involved and should have been promoting it. And that's where we are now. So my thing is this: with the city, I've completely disengaged from the city. I'm a kid, but you want to say you're just a little ghetto youth, like this, that, and the other. Yeah, that's right. That's where I'm from. That's how we're raised. But how we met is this: that went up. I seen the press release. And I was like, boom, this is crazy. I'm watching all the noise go around. In the morning, there was incredible support for the statue. Then you could see that it's like a directive went out at midday and the temperatures just turned cold on it, really cold. All of a sudden, it became about Mark Quinn, this white artist. And what's really surprising about that, this is the home of Banksy. Banksy has done art that represents every ethnicity in the world. He's gone to every country in the world and put his art everywhere. And he is lauded and nobody puts into question what his ethnicity is for the work or the causes he faces. But all of a sudden, it wasn't about this strong, powerful black woman standing up in the face of adversity against racism. It got narrowed down to this tiny little thing about the white artist. When I'm looking on all the social medias around it, I suddenly seen something from Shawn. I'm seeing that Shawn knew Jen Reid, because I didn't know who Jen Reid was. So then I got a message to Shawn to say, Shawn, can you please get my number to Jen Reid so I can thank this woman, yeah, for saying that any sale, any money that comes from this statue would go to a project that we're doing that has not been invested in the city. And but you kind of know the story from there, Shawn. You relayed the numbers, and then the very next day, bam, I'm at Jen Reid's house. Like, you all right? And,
I mean, that's the funny thing. Like you told me before, that people think that you were working.
Conspiracy. They might be. Yeah, like, nah, they set this whole thing up. Now, guess what we are though? We're like kindred spirits. Yeah. Guess what? I'm not going to swear, but I should say I would say, but I'm not going to. But just know this: I don't need no permission from anybody to write, because all my life growing up, we were always told no. So we learned very quickly. You don't ask, you just do. Same with them putting the statue up. They did try to engage with the city to get it there. Like when it first came out, the mayor was saying, "Yeah, I hadn't spoken to anyone." Don't lie. You know you've spoken to them before. You know you were in talks with them before. And then you're acting like this white artist has come and ambushed your city that you were talking to. So don't put this image out there that's a lie. Yeah, you were corresponding with him, right? But you spun it this different way. But in the end, you know what they did? They just came and put it up there anyway without your permission. Yeah, and that's what we do. We will work to make a difference regardless what the system wants to do. If people want to keep the status quo in the city of Bristol. Yeah, when you think where we are, what we've got in place, and they couldn't even change some words on the plaque on the clip. In 2020, we've still got a slave trader standing in the city of what's meant to be a multicultural, diverse city.
I'm sorry, can I just say something here? You know, people say, you know, this needs to be a community decision. But let's face it, the community actually didn't want Edward Colston there anyway. This is something that people have petitioned for years to have removed. And now all of a sudden, the city must decide. Well, I think the city decided quite some time ago that they didn't actually want Edward Colston there. So it's a little bit smoke and mirrors. Shawn, I'm quite happy to show you some things privately, but the narrative that is being put out there is false. But you know, it is what it is. It's happened, and you know what? I've been given a platform, and it's about moving forward and using that positively. And for me, it's all about children.
And that's
so,
right.
You know.
And that's the classroom series, the education, that's what we're going to do. It's always been about children with the work. You know, my work started to try to protect the children in the city. And now it's to educate the children, to let them understand they could be anything they dream to be. And we're having fun. This is the one thing, I know it's a bit, no, we're really having fun. Like, we are having so much fun knowing that we're creating change and knowing that change is coming. To be able to be the change you want to see. So that's where we're at right now. And so since then, the statue went up. I met Jen. We formed this friendship. Yeah, Jen wanted to go into schools and educate. I did the poetry and the work I did because I don't want to go into schools. I went to 6 secondary schools. I hate school. Yeah, I got thrown out. Like, so I don't want to go back into the schools, but Jen does. Jen goes through the schools. We promote Cargo Classroom. Jen tells her stories. We're taking these. The first series we released was the Revolutionaries. So the first series of lessons were Nanny the Maroons, the Haitian Revolution built around the story of Dutty Bookman, Paul Bogle and Samuel Sharp, people that stood up against adversity when it was cost them their lives because they wanted to make the change. We can't lose our lives for the changes we're trying to make today. There's no shackles on these wrists. The only shackles people have are here. Yeah, we are so free with the ability of technology to do so much that before we couldn't do because certain institutions controlled the key to the lock to the door. Yeah, well, we don't even need to go through those doors anymore. Some people say, oh, on your behavior, attitude, you're unemployable. Yeah, I'm unemployable, so I created my own company and employed myself. Yeah.
I mean, I want to get into that a bit later when we do the Q&A bit, because all three of you have got your own, operations, companies and things like that. So definitely want to get into that, for us, by us.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I just want to, I'm going to need to move on. I'm interested. You had a video that you're going to play, and I think that might be a good way to play it out.
Yeah, so what I got, so the funny thing is, one last thing, everybody attacked everyone attacked Mark Quinn for making a statue, but everybody applauds the white people that pulled down the statue. What is going on in this city? Please, can somebody explain to me what's going on in this city? 1 minute white people are no good, 1 minute white people are good. When white people helping black people, on one side they're good, on the other side they're not, and then vice versa. Hypocrisy beyond belief. It's just like, or is it whoever signs the check you want to keep happy? Yeah, where the money might come from, let's not upset them. Because if we upset them, we might not get paid to serve them. Yeah, that's how it feels to me. So what we did, the poem, which only a part of it was used in the Enslaved documentary series, we actually made that film in support of the Colston for when their first court appearance was. It's actually, the poem is read to you by Dana Royal, who's a young girl that read a poem at the Black Lives Matter protest on my behalf with my son on the 7th of June last year, because I wasn't attending. Yeah, I was tired of people for a moment thinking we matter. We've mattered every day I've been born. My children have mattered every single day. I don't need a specific day to suddenly think that we're relevant. So let me just play the poem. The poem is called The Bristol Trade. It was actually written in 2009, but we put it out in support of the Colston 4. And I'll play out with that.
Oh, share the screen.
Oh, sorry, hold on. Let's go again. All right, share screen.
Yeah. Did you share the sound?
You give me a tutorial all at once.
I think it should be all right.
I think I put the sound on.
Yeah, give it a play. I think it should be all right.
Can you hear it?
It's louder when the voice kicks in, so let's wait.
That's right.
Bristol built Colston's Hall, a new extension clad in gold, which reminded me of all the African souls Bristol built and sold. Edward Colston is held as the beacon for this trade, when the reality is that through it, Bristol was made. Bristol profited in so many ways, to name them all would take us days. Trade, commerce, and stature is to name just a few of how through the African people's suffering, Bristol grew. It was called the slave trade so that the people who profited could say their gains were legally made. But if we were able to talk to Milosevic, Pinochet, or Hitler, they would say the same, even though we know their regimes were sinister. What Hitler did was rightly called the Holocaust. Shouldn't the same be said for Africa when you see all she lost? Through persecutions, beating, fear, and death, people were enslaved till their last breath. People were taken from all over the great continent, never to return, and over time, many would forget everything they did ever learn. Imagine not being allowed to speak in your native tongue. Imagine not being allowed to educate your young. Then over time your ways are lost and your history is forgotten. You become part of a world where you belong at the bottom. How is it possible for people to absorb such pain? How could they witness such horrors and not go insane? These are just a few of the things they had to endure, so that the people who made it legal could gain more. The people who did it said they were the civilized ones. They keep rewriting history to make their case. But if we look at the facts and the facts alone, he was uncivilized and savage is easily shown.
Nice. That is important. I'm glad the Colston 4 mentioned. We can't forget the Colston 4 very real individuals that are going through some very real legal strife. So yeah, you know. Oh, if you just stop your yeah, thanks. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone's got the link for support the Colston 4 fund. If anyone's got that, that would be good to share, because it's important. They need to support. But thank you, Lawrence. Powerful contribution. Thank you, Jen, as well. And we'll come back to you for the Q&A afterwards. So give thanks for that as inspirational. So now over to Samenua Sesher, director of the Museum of Colour, a coach, educationalist, speaker, writer, and many other things. So it's an honour to have you here, Samenua. So over to you. Thank you.
Hey, I took myself off mute, am I? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm going to share a few slides, but I'm just going to kind of chat. Lawrence, you've inspired me to ensure I keep it real. I tend to, but you never know how much people can handle. So this is the question that I have. And when Shawn asked me to come and join this, I was like, well, I'm not from Bristol. And I think he said to me, do you think you're an activist? And it was a really good question. So I had to ask myself if what I'm doing and what I'm trying to create is activism. And the truth is, you might have got a bit of a bad sandwich this evening. I don't know that I am. So this is an exploration for me. This is a genuine question. So my question is, can you be a quiet activist? Now, this has always been a question for me because I believe I was born vexed. And but I was brought up in an environment where that was supposed to be hidden. And I was brought up in a leafy North London suburb. And to the white people, I didn't sound black, but to the black people, I also didn't sound black because blackness is associated with being poor. So it was a growing up of not having a place. But about 20 years ago, I had a partner who was in a band. And one of the band members was an amazing dread called Jude. And Jude always used to just sort of look at me, not in a leering way, but a sort of inquisitive way. He would just look at me. And one day I said to him, I said, Jude, you just always look at me, you don't talk to me. And he said, yo, princess, this is why I'm looking at you. He said, you have something to do. And you need to remember that you have something to do. And some of us have to keep Babylon busy so people like you can get through the door and do what you have to do. And the truth is, at the time, I had no idea what he was talking about. But I came to understand exactly what he meant. So the next slide is just about activism. And I literally just pulled this off Google because I was like, yeah, are you an activist? What is activism? Can you put yourself in any of these definitions of activism? And I'm like, I have no policy. I don't know if I'm vigorous. I'm definitely not campaigning. I'm like, that's for somebody else. direct action, yeah, I suppose you could call what I'm doing direct, but I don't know. I'm not sure people would describe it as direct action. Political, social goals, I definitely have those. I'm not sure about the political, but having said that, I think everything is political, so maybe. And involves supporting a particular cause, range of causes, or opposing it. I don't know. The truth is, I was still in two minds. Am I an activist? I don't know. So, but I said, yeah, because it's hard to say no to Shawn, got to be honest. So, where does an activist live? Where is activism? The truth is, in my mind, I grew up, I'm a child of the 60s. For me, activism looked like African Americans with your fist in the air. Many years ago, I played Angela Davis in Black Heroes in the Hall of Fame. And one of the proudest days of my life was to play Angela Davis with Angela Davis in the audience. And she came up onto the stage, and prized possession is me and Angela Davis was with our fists in the air. Angela Davis describes herself as an accidental activist. She fell into it. It's like, how do you fall into activism? You've got to be direct, So I'm still thinking about this. Where does an activist live? My sense is that activism comes from the street. It's something that's born from struggle. And how does somebody who has never really struggled, well, yeah, I did struggle, but not in a recognizable way, can you be an activist? So this is me thinking, you have a £3.5 million budget that you give the green light on. You have your own board, but you're working in a large institution. Can you be an activist? You have no money, but a cunning plan, small but committed posse. You execute it brilliantly, but no news outlets, news outlets refuse to cover it. So it lives and dies on social media alone, and it doesn't change anything. Are you an activist? I don't know. Genuine questions. Are you only an activist if you succeed? Or can you be an activist irrespective? Now, I'm not going to dwell too long on this because it distresses me, but when I did history at school, you show up you show up in slavery and you're like, whoa, is this where we start? Is this our beginning? And I remember being shown this years ago, and something about this image really haunted me. And it wasn't just that it was a female Negro slave. We know this story. It's painful as it is, we know this story. But there was something about this image. It's like she was posing. But it's like she had her hand in front of her face, like she was ashamed. But it was also like she was holding the weight on her head. Was there somebody there telling her she had to hold this weight on her head? Was somebody asking her to pose in this way? There was a strangeness about this that haunted me. So fast forward, we'll come back to Ellen and her selfie in a minute. I had the idea to build a museum of colour in 2013. And I had actually got sick, and my senior arts management career looked like it was on the ropes. And because I couldn't do a full week's work anymore, and I had to pull back. So I said, you know what, I'm going to move to the seaside, write a novel, chill. Maybe volunteer for a charity. That's exactly what I did. I volunteered for the Oxfam bookshop. I wrote a novel, didn't like it much. And I ran by the sea. And I guess without realizing, I was healing myself. But I was invited to various things still in London, I'd show up. And this one was held at BAFTA. And Lenny Henry was there. Some other famous actors were there. I think, I can't remember all the names. But what struck me about this event was just how angry the successful artists were. These are not people who are struggling to make a living, can't make ends meet or whatever. These are people that, they're good, they're set. Angry, hurt. Adrian Lester was there, Mira Sayar, and the anger was real. It was visible. And I was like, whoa, now if you arrive and you're still in that kind of pain, what kind of pain is somebody in who, can't can't catch a break in their chosen artistic profession. And a profession in the arts is cruel. It's full of insecurity. You take your inner thoughts on life and you proffer them up for people to be paid to criticize. And you expose yourself time and time again. Whether you are a visual artist or an actor or whatever your form, it is a level of exposure. And it is wrought with rejection. And if those who are at the top of the game are still angry, what is going on? And I went back to Folkestone, where I live now, and I thought, we're in pain. This is not something I didn't know, but I had time to think about it. I was like, this is just pain. All I was seeing at that event was pain. And I was like, how can I, with my own broke up self, help with this? And I had done my bit for diversity. I was in charge of that £3.5 million. And I think over the 5 years that I spent it, I feel like I spent it well. People would say to me, what are you doing? And I would say, I'm throwing as many good people through the window before it locks shut, because it will. And it did. But I didn't want to do that anymore. So I remember once asking Hilary Carty, who's the director of Claw, but she's done many things. And I said to her, do you want to come to an event? It was a diversity in theatre event. And she was like, yo. She's like, you know what? This diversity thing, say it's a relay. And I ran my part of the relay and I ran hard. I'm handing over the baton. And I thought, okay, yeah, I'm kind of liking this metaphor, because I'm done with the diversity thing too. Done. Somebody else to do it. It has to be done. But, you know, I've done a good stint. So what am I going to do? And I was thinking about, I've never seen myself as a curator. I've been many things, but never a curator. I don't know why I started to just look at what it means to curate, but I realized that it came from the word to care. And I heard somebody say that what people most want to hear is not, I love you. But what people want to know is, do you see me? Do you hear me? Do I matter? And I personally believe that anybody's job in this world is to show up and just do your best. Yeah, whatever society you find yourself in, you do your best. You take the skills you have, whatever they are. We've all got different skills. That's how it's supposed to work. And you do your best with those skills. And I thought, what skills do I have? I had turned myself from a theatre person into a cross arts person to further my career on purpose. So I had those cross art form skills. I understood the mechanics of the visual arts world, as well as I did the theatre world, as well as I do the dance world, as well as I do the publishing world. So how can I use that? And how can I do something that may help with the healing? And when I realized that curate means to care, and I thought about what museums were, I thought, you know what, I'm going to build a museum. I didn't want a building. I never wanted a building, because I've done a lot of organizational development and consultancy. And I know that once you have a building, especially if it's funded by external people, you spend a lot of your time worried about how clean the toilets are and keeping the doors open. And I was like, I don't have the energy for that. And I don't need to, because we have a digital space now that we could choose what we put in. But when I was thinking about it and conceptualizing it in my mind, I wanted to look at how to pay homage to, respect to, celebrate artists of color who have committed to making their work at a time when skin color is a loaded, contested, difficult thing in a sector that is already fraught with difficulty. But the truth is, I thought about it, and I was just, a rock woman with an old iMac by the sea, and I was like, how am I going to do this? I can't raise any money. I don't want to go back to these people. The idea of putting my hand out and begging people for money for the next 20 years of my life, wasn't feeling it. But then this happened. Oscars March 2014, and this selfie apparently broke the internet. One of many things that have broken the internet. And apparently it was staged by Samsung, by the way, but anyway, it still broke the internet. So I was coaching that morning, but I knew who won the Oscar for Best Film. And so this is somebody I've been following their career all through times. This is an extraordinary individual. This is a British man. And I finished, before I went to do my coaching, I wanted to just have a look and see that man with his Oscar. And I opened a BBC website, and this is all I saw. This is all I saw. Now, there's no way Ralph Fiennes win the Oscar for Best Film, and that is all you see. No way. Not happening. Not happening. And I thought, you know what, by the time I finish coaching my client, it's going to be gone. There will be the man with his Oscar. And I'll be like, yes, got it. But no, finished coaching my client, went back onto the website. This is the only photographic Oscar presence. So I'm there in my little yard in Folkestone going, dear BBC, where is Steve? The man has won the Oscar for Best Film. Not Best Makeup Artist, Best Costume, Best Fling-a-ding, Best Film. Where is the man with his gong? So I'm not a passive person. I phone up the BBC. I'm like, hey, where is Steve? A very embarrassed Irish man was on the phone. And he was embarrassed. It was just, he's like, well, we know what happened. We know what happened. The picture editor of the day decided that the Ellen DeGeneres selfie was more important than Steve. And that's the one that they went with. And that's when I was like, no. Sorry, institutions. Can't trust you. Can never trust you. You've written us out of history once before, and you are not doing it again. If you can decide that somebody like Steve McQueen, who's not just won the Oscar, Steve McQueen is the only living artist to have won the Turner Prize and an Oscar. If you don't recognize that man's brilliance with a flipping photo, no, we can't trust you. I need to build a museum. So in this is important to share. I knew that it was going to be a big undertaking, and I knew that I needed to conceptualize it really well. I didn't have any private income. I had to go find the money. And even though my father was a successful businessman, partly because my father was a successful businessman, I had no appetite for business. So I did some work on what I really wanted it to be. When did I want it to start? What did I want the run to be? And we start in 1766 with Sancho's correspondence with Lawrence Sterne about his writing. And we go to 2016, so it's 250 years. And it is looking at the contribution that people of colour have made to British culture in film, television, and the arts. That is the ambition. Now, I know this is not small, but so what? So I decided I'm going to go and talk to some people that I knew when I knew some people. So I went to talk to the then chief executive of the BFI. I went to talk to Moira, who was an ex-colleague from when I was at the Arts Council. In fact, she was still at the Arts Council. She was executive director at the Arts Council. She's now chief executive of Paul Hamlin Trust. I went to talk to Moira, and I was asking these people, I was like, you know what, I'm thinking about doing this thing. I'm going to need some support. Do you think this is needed? Do you think you would want to come in? Do you think this is something you guys could back? I went to Maurice Davies, who's the ex-chief executive of the Museums Association. I talked to Maurice. Maurice was like, you have to do this. Moira was like, you have to do this. I can't remember the lady from the film BFI, but she was like, you have to do this. She was like, our archives are so woefully underused. This would be brilliant. And I'm not saying this stuff to name drop, it's making a point. I emailed Tony Hall while he was still Director General at BBC, and I didn't know if he was going to remember me, but I knew him from when he was running the Opera House. And I said, look, this is what I'm trying to do. It's really ambitious. Can I talk to somebody in your archives? Is this something that you think, you guys could get behind? Sort of things. He said, whoa, you need to talk to this person, set me up with a meeting. And he did remember me, which was nice. But talk to all of those people. It took me 5 years to raise a penny. Yeah. I was rejected so many times. I was like, okay, I'm not using up my money. And because, you've got to do your hustle while you've got to keep the lights on. I'm not going to use up my energy putting in any more bids until I have a partner that they can't turn down. And so I met a wonderful woman called Lucy Shaw, and this made me think about what Jen was saying about Mark Quinn. I met a wonderful woman called Lucy Shaw, who is, she works for Oxford Gardens, Libraries and Museums. And I did a diversity beat talk that I don't like doing, and it went down like a bucket of sick. People didn't want to hear what I had to say, but I didn't care, I said it anyway. And when it came to questions, nobody had any questions. And I said to them, I said, well, you know, you're a room full of museum professionals. I'm trying to build a museum. So if anybody's got any advice for me, please come up and speak to me afterwards. Nobody did, apart from Lucy. And she came up to me and she said, how can I help? I said, okay, I can start with that. Fast forward, what we're doing is we are building the exhibitions by art form, but I needed to test the concept. So to test the concept, we have put on an exhibition called People of Letters. And it was people who have supported writers of color. But what we also do when we do these exhibitions is we also do a response gallery. And the response gallery is where we commission artists of color to respond to existing British heritage. So these two photos in front of you are of the launch. And we launched at Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, and you are looking at Kai Miller, and his chosen object was a lacewood whip. This is a little excerpt from that poem. To learn to play that mass is to learn the weight of a whip and how to hold it, how to slice the air above your head in a curling hiss, and how to accept on your own skin the occasional lash. It is to know the precise use of aloe vera, we call it single Bible. It is to know the scripture of plants, how to balm the bruised body each night. The memory of your whipped body is not where you wanted this thought to end, but what else is at the end of whips, if not our bodies? You wanted to consider a whip without its context, to hear the news that 21 MPs have been robbed of their whips, which is to say, stripped of their power. You want to hear this without flinching. You want to see no connection. The long hiss above your hair that curls between your present and the past like something charged, a memory you have no right to. You want only to consider the lacewood whip without the haunt of history. And when Kai delivered that poem, he does it way more powerfully than me, and it's a longer poem. I couldn't sit in the audience because I was pacing behind some artifacts in the back of the museum. I was just too stressed. But the director of that museum, she said, I had chills because people are looking at that lacewood whip and they're not seeing what Kai was seeing. And Museum of Colour is actually about perspective. It is about empowering people to put their perspective on things that exist. And it's also about saying, we see you, we hear you, you matter. You have changed the culture in these aisles. When I went to school, a school disco was dangerous, yeah? Now I go to a dance and I'm sorry, but white women are bouncing me because their hips are moving so fast. They weren't moving in the 70s in the way they're moving now. You hear spoken word over adverts and you don't bat an eyelid. There was no spoken word in that style in the 70s. We have changed the culture of this place. And yet we're dealing with the nonsense we saw dished out when we do something that this country does not like. I should say some people in this country don't like. So I don't know. I don't think of myself as, I'm not sure I think of myself as an activist. I still don't know. And I think it's for others really to say. It's not really for me to say. That's Eric Huntley that you're looking at now, husband of Jessica Huntley, and they are in the museum. And that's his portrait. It's taken by Sharon Wallace. And this is a sneak peek at a new exhibition that we're going to launch. It's our COVID response exhibition, and we will be launching it in September. And I'm going to take myself off share. And that's what I'm doing. And I am purposefully keeping it quiet because I know what it is like to have the spotlight on you big time. And I know what it is like to be with Jeremy Paxman on Newsnight because the organization that you're working for doesn't trust any of its other directors to do press. I know what it is like to receive death threats because people believe you're spending too much money on people that don't even belong in their country. And I know that basically that is just a distraction. And so I don't need that distraction. So I'm building it slowly and quietly. And that's me.
Thank you very much. Powerful. Thank you. And I love that reflection of, do you hear me? Do you see me? Do I matter? I think, with activism comes hope. And, I hear that question, am I an activist? Do you know what I mean? I think that's part of the question. What is activism? Because just from being a black body in a space with a voice, we get labeled an activist, whether we want that label or not. Do you know what I mean? So that's why, you know what I mean? It's like, but your work is powerful. It has a resonance. It also upsets people and it angers people, which, if that's not activism, I don't know what it is. But no, give thanks. That was powerful. So we'll move on and then obviously come back to you for the Q&A. So give thanks. So now, last but by no means least, Michael Jenkins. As I say, filmmaker, producer, co-founder of Black Wave. Former, I know you as Low Dose as well, some powerful beats back in the day. He was a hip-hop artist. So yeah, the stage is yours, Michael. Give thanks for being here. It's an honor.
Blessings, Shawn, for inviting me to come here and talk on this panel and talk about a bit about my journey. So yeah, Shawn, you're right. That's where I started as Low Dose, as a rapper, as a hip-hop artist, part of a Bristol record label called Cruelly Cut. And I suppose, my activism journey really started in school, because in school I was very much the one, protesting the curriculum and protesting what we were learning and protesting the perspective we were given. So I think that's where my activism started. And I guess as I was doing with my music and through my music, that was also a channel for it. I made a song years ago called Television, which was really my sort of idea of, what the TV is doing to the country and is doing specifically to my people and, to Black people. And, when I started learning about the history of, media and the way Black people are represented, this is what spurred me on to start my first business in 2012, which was 8 Cents Media. And what I wanted to do with that was to create, just to give an alternative narrative, to actually see characters and see people that I hadn't grown up seeing on TV, and to hear stories. And the first story that I came across was of a legendary radio presenter that used to present radio on UGMA and BCFM, the local stations here. He was called Cyrus the Virus, and I just loved his show anyway. He was quite a controversial character. I loved his show, and I sort of said that I wanted to help him, put visuals to his show. And he was all on board and really open. And as I started talking with him and learning about his story, he started telling me about how he was a soldier who served in Northern Ireland. And at that point, that was the first, Black man that I'd ever seen personally that was a soldier that served in the army. I knew that they existed, and I was angry in school that I wasn't being told anything about them. But this was the first time I actually got to speak with somebody and learn about their story. And I think, that mixed with going to Sheffield Documentary Festival one year on a course, as part of a course, that inspired me to really look at documentary filmmaking as a way of getting these stories out and getting these perspectives out, and to hear people's stories that need to be told. So that was the first short documentary I made, which was called Black Soldier, White Army. You can search that. And I think, and then from there, I've just been, honing my craft and learning about filmmaking and, helping getting other people involved in filmmaking in order to give, because essentially the tools have opened up, they became cheap enough for anybody to really start, putting together stories and making content. So I think that's sort of why I started. More recently, I've been doing, and so my ethos was really to try and change the narrative and to give, unheard voices and to showcase untold stories. And I've been doing that sort of, throughout the years since 2012, and in 2018, through working outside of the system, because I didn't go to university or college to learn filmmaking or anything like that. I just learned it by doing it. And eventually I was getting recognition from, places like the BBC and Channel 4, and I did a little stint at the BBC and made films in a different way, which was, and my boss at the time told me about the way that I was approaching subjects was just completely different to how they've been doing it. For example, I wanted to tell a story about health inequalities in Bristol, and the fact that if you live in Clifton, your life expectancy, you're expected to live 10 times longer than if you live in Easton, which is only 3 miles away. And I looked at it through the lens that there was about 7 takeaways in Clifton and almost 50 in Easton. And we wanted to address this, and I followed a group of mums that were basically on this journey to really understand why this is the case and to really promote healthy eating. And people come up to me and said, well, this is the first time we've ever done a story about the Somali community, which isn't about FGM or isn't about terrorism or isn't about anything negative. It was just a group of, mums that happen to be Somali that are on a quest to really, find out how they can decrease the health inequality and promote healthy eating. So I've always seen, filmmaking and telling stories as a tool, as a way of getting messages across and getting perspectives out there. And more recently, I've been sort of, looking at a whole plethora of ways of telling stories, because there's so many. So that's what I was doing the last few years. And then obviously last year happened. I set up a production company. So I was working freelance for a long time, and I partnered up with a woman called Dr. Mina Fombo, and we basically started this organization called Black Wave, because we saw a real lack of the fact that Channel 4 was coming here, and there's over 150 production companies in the city, and not one of them is BME led, basically, which we thought was quite shocking. So we set up Black Wave Productions late 2019, and we got started in it in 2020, and so we were working on it and had a really good rapport with different commissioners, and with the same ethos, exactly the same ethos of giving a voice to those unheard voices and telling those untold stories. So obviously then the pandemic hit, everything shut down. We didn't know what we were doing. We were actually commissioned to do a short film in partnership with the BBC about for the 40th anniversary of the St. Paul's riots. But again, we were filming with elders, so that had to be cancelled because of COVID. And so we were plodding along as you do, still developing ideas, and the Black Lives Matter march was happening. So we filmed the Black Lives Matter march that happened in Bristol in 2016. My company 8 Cents Media filmed that because, again, we were there on the front line of these protests to see what's happening. Sorry. And so when I heard the next one was happening, I was automatically like, yeah, I just need to go down there and capture this, because we're in the middle of a pandemic. People from the Black community are more affected by this virus. And, we've just seen, a modern day lynching happening, which has just gone viral. So I wanted to capture it and see how people thought about it. Obviously didn't know that the statue was going to go down. I had a little bit of a feeling, because I've been making a film for the last 5 years about a group of protesters called Countering Colston that have been, really talking about this narrative and trying to change this narrative. I'm going to show you a little snippet of the documentary that I've been working on. So I was in this environment, and obviously I was there on the day filming when the statue came down, and you know, that was an epic moment. You know, I mean, obviously a lot of people were told to stay home and take the knee at home, but you know, to be in that environment with over 10,000 people protesting. I'd never seen so many people at a protest. I filmed lots of protests, you know, in Bristol and in London, but I'd never ever seen that sort of a scale. And that was it was really empowering. And to see the statue on the floor and to be around it when everybody was around it, it was you know, and we did the, you know, 8 minutes of silence, you know, for George Floyd. It was a euphoric moment, which was really, really, obviously nobody knew that it was gonna, you know, travel and become this viral moment and this such pivoting moment in British history that it had become. But yeah, being there on the ground was epic. What I'll do is I'll just quickly show you a snippet of some of this film, which has been 5 years in the making, about countering Colston. So I'll just play some of that now.
They choose to allow children wearing the flower of the favourites of, you know, the slave trader in their building. It's going to be a member of the clergy that's taken this service. It's going to be that clergy member that's reading the will. They're complicit with it. It's their building. They're responsible for what happens inside their building. It's their choice to say, actually, you either need to find somewhere else or you need to change what you're doing.
I don't know whether we're going to change everybody's minds, because some people just, I mean, you can see here, some people don't even want to know about the history. They you know, I'm against it. Won't take the leaflet. I mean, it seems a bit silly, really. I think it's really talking about the history and getting that straight. I think we've won that battle. I mean, to see the newspapers actually saying what the history of Edward Colston is, which has always been a problem. It's always been obscured. And I think we've got that.
You've got that sort of that. They're actually being honest.
Yeah, like, you know, we've got the numbers. We know what he did, and I think the big question for us as historians at the moment is trying to track his investments, and that's been very difficult because all these accounts of Edward Colston never existed. The ledgers, everything will tell you where he made his money. So we know how much money he made. We've got an idea where he might have made it, but we haven't all the evidence to confirm that yet. So we're still working on that. Okay, and then that'll kind of nail it with respect to the history side of it. You know. Okay. I can have a rest, that'll be good.
So that's just a little snippet. Obviously, they have done the research. They've written a book from Wall Street to Colston, and that book is now out with all the research that they've done. You know, for the first time, really documenting where the money came from. So yeah, so that documentary will be out, you know, by the end of the year, and it sort of ends with, you know, the statue coming down and January's statue being put up. But obviously the story will always go on because it's an ongoing conversation that you know, we need to have. And in response to that specific moment, you know, I was working with you know, a great artist and creative called Christelle Pellicure, and she had an idea she had a spoken word piece that she wanted to do. I said to her, right, let's do it, let's make it, let's do it around this issue. And you know, we made a film called Echoes of Our Ancestors, which was then used for a European project, which is looking at decolonizing, you know, a lot of cities around Europe, you know, places in, you know, specifically France, you know, Belgium, England. So it's part of that project. So I will play that now.
Pouvez-vous entendre les douleurs et la tristesse infinie de mes ancêtres qui n'ont pas survécu les horreurs du passage du milieu? Pouvez-vous les entendre clairement dans chaque battement de vague? Les pleurs ne peuvent être entendus que par ceux qui osent croire. Usisahau mahali unapotoka. Maarifa ni ufunguo wa uhuru wako. The first time my feet hugged the street of Bristol, obliviously strolling into a century of hidden history. Lifting the veil of the city, awakening the dark truth. Haunted by the unwritten struggle of my forefathers. Strolling through the nonchalantly and remorseless city, you feel the presence of our ancestors and their burden. Forever deprived of their dignity and humanity. Often turning to the city for answers, my foremothers' essence is reflected back with opulence. Usisahau mahali unapotoka. Maarifa ni ufunguo wa uhuru wako. How can such a beautiful city hold so much darkness? This place where a statue is toppled to make history. City of sanctuary, wonder and contradictions. City of wealth and inequality. City of grandiose sugar houses and tea factories. You can wash off the blood and bury the lies beneath our feet. But the stains will forever remain trapped in the cobbled streets. For comfort, you can whisper sweet melody, but that would only be delusion. Your echoes only whistle back your old trauma. Struggling to reconcile the horror and the beauty, a divided legacy where many still can't acknowledge their story. Guinea Street will forever remain part of the Guinean trade, imprinted with images of ships, fine English tea, and imperial cigarettes. We will always stand tall to remember the truth, continuing to rise and find strength in the knowledge of our history. We will always honor the spirit of those who came before us. I can hear loud and clear the echoes of my ancestors for the city.
Yeah, so that was oh, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm still here. So that was you know, a bit of a response to what happened on that day, and a reflection, obviously, of sort of where we're at, and you know, the legacy of this trade, and you know, but so that's sort of Black Wave, and what I've been doing through my production company. I mean, we've got ideas in at the moment, with Channel 4 and Netflix. So it's I mean, that's really exciting, because we're really excited to be able to tell narratives and tell stories that just have been skipped over for generations, and we can start telling some of these stories and put them out. Yeah, and then so before the statue came down, about a year before the statue actually came down, my business partner and I also had an idea of actually how do we address issues within the city, issues of inequality, as artists. Now, as artists, we know that we feel like having a space within the center of the city is really important, because for a long time Black people haven't connected to that center space, because there isn't anything on that space which belongs to us, or anywhere where we can really feel welcomed. And that's been like that for many years. So she also runs something called Black Girl Convention. She was thinking, well, we need a space for that as well. So we came up with this idea of, a Black arts barge. At the moment, it's got quite a long-winded name. It's called the Bristol African Caribbean Culture Space, but we have got a new name that we're gonna put out with that. But essentially, what it is, it's a Black arts barge. So it's a space where we want to have, where people from all over the city and all over the country can experience, Black artists' work in the centre of Bristol, on that historic harbour, which we know has, a significance for people of the African diaspora. So we want to try and reclaim some of this space. I mean, for a long time, I've heard people don't want to go to the Harbour Festival because they call it the slave trading festival. And we want to try and create something which can help move the conversation on, because with this conversation, it's a very divisive conversation. We want to create a space which is in a historic place in Bristol, which can, through arts, really help to address that and sort of move the conversation going. So, I mean, I will just briefly share with you some of our plans and ideas for this art space. If I can just pull it up a second. Okay. Okay, where is it? It was here, but it has just disappeared. Okay, it's there. Okay, so this is the the Bristol African Caribbean Culture Space, and this is a space that we want to have within Bristol's Harbour. So it's founded by myself, Dr. Mina Fombo, and her brother, who is the financial person. But we have four pillars that we are creating in this. We want to champion the work of Black artists and creators for everyone to enjoy. But this is not just Bristol centric, because Black people of colour from all over the Southwest and Wales look to Bristol as a bit of a hub, as a space for people for them to come. So we want to, this is what this space is for, to really, showcase and be, an attraction for Bristol. We also want to have, it's all about, Black artist development. So we want to have a dedicated program, of creative arts and technology development, so we can provide these opportunities. So we are, creating within this space will be, a tech space, for creative arts. Also, history, Afrofuturism, we want to look at it we want to look at history, but do it in a different way, because we don't want the conversation can get stale, and we feel like as young people and as a younger generation, in the next 25 years we want to be a bit further on in this conversation than what we were 25 years ago, because from what I'm hearing from people, we're in the same place. Obviously the statue coming down has moved it forward a lot, but there is this misunderstanding. So our idea is for it to be accessible and green, and a world-class venue, a tourist attraction for Bristol on its harbour, which deals with this history, but also showcases exhibitions from Black artists, theatre spaces, and obviously my passion, film, is also something that will exist in this space. I mean, we have an artist collective, so we're working with about 10 artists, which is always changing, which are basically working with us to figure out what the offer is and what's going to be inside this vessel. We're looking at other vessels, and we are talking with the council about where we're going to moor it, because we're not we're not doing this for a little bit of time. We're, you know, this is all about legacy, and you know, the key part of this legacy is for it to be Black owned. You know, so we've got lots of different sort of ideas of, you know, what the space will look like once we get inside it, and how, you know, it will interact with the harbour. And I can put a link to you know, more information about that. So yeah, and so what we did is when the statue did come down, we decided to launch our GoFundMe page, which was you know, a response, and we had such an amazing reaction to it, which is great. So we are still fundraising, we're still in that fundraising period, and you know, we're still building, but we're very much, because of COVID, we're very much offering an online, you know, version of this space as well as a physical version of the space. So again, we've similar to what Samia said with the Museum of Color, we just feel like we want to, you know, give a different context, give a different context, and add to the narrative, you know, because this is the problem, you know, this narrative has just been hidden. So we want to change that and really open it up for everybody in Bristol to learn, because, you know, Bristol is a space, you know, for everybody. So that's our GoFundMe. So it, you know, great for you to share that within your network, and yeah, happy to answer any questions. But I feel like that's a bit of a summary of how, you know, I've used arts over the last 10 years. I've used arts, you know, as activism, but I think intrinsically within what I do and how I think, you know, activism is always there, and it's been there for a long time since I learned about, you know, this history. So yeah, I'll stop there, Shawn. But yeah, bless people. Any questions? Just yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for sharing a lot of work there, and yeah, triggering lots of thought. And for those of you, just to start to line up your questions, because we're going to come to you for questions and comment in a bit. And just, I was talking earlier about the GoFundMe page for the Colston 4. So I've just put that in there as well to support the Colston 4. So glad Colston gone. So please do share that. So one thing that kind of struck me with all of your presentations, really, well, there's lots of crossover. Obviously, lots of talk about Colston and things like this in terms of Bristol context. And there's obviously Black Lives Matter of George Floyd, and all of you, you know, your projects predated the 25th of May last year, when George Floyd was murdered. Peace be upon him. But no doubt it was a shift, you know, and the Black Lives Matter protests were a shift, and for Bristol particularly, the Colston moment was a shift. Can you think of other times in your kind of careers growing up where shifts have happened, of things that have happened that have made you go, stop in your tracks, and then, you know, kind of spurred you to make work? You know, Michael, you talked about, you know, listening to Cyrus on Ujima and that being a spark for making a film. So I just wonder, with Lawrence and Samenua, and also yourself, Michael, obviously this has been a sizable shift that's happened this year, and other shifts that have happened, maybe, I don't know, that have spurred you to pick up the pen, the paint, whatever, and do something.
Yeah, I think, you know, with other things that have happened that have spurred me on, I think the coalition government, that was quite an interesting time when that happened. And, you know, a lot of, you know, people that I know that were students, that really felt like that whole coalition thing was really changing things. But I think, you know, from when I can't really remember anything that happened in the city around the 2007 conversations that were going on, because I was just young, basically. That wasn't where I was at. So I don't know, from how I'm thinking of it, as far as like what's changed this conversation or helps move this conversation a bit more along, would be, you know, the statue getting ripped down. I mean, that is the biggest thing that I can think of within my lifetime that's happened. But talking with elders and olders, you know, they say about the Bristol bus boycott, they talk about the St. Paul's riots or uprisings, they talk about that as being, you know, a big change that happened at that point. So I would say, but for my generation now, I'd say that this statue coming down has really, you know, shifted this conversation.
Thank you. Samenua, just to move outside of Bristol in your kind of career, can you think of other moments of shift for you?
I'm muting myself. Yeah, I mean, for me, the Deptford fire blew my mind, and the way that it was covered, and the Stephen Lawrence murder. And yeah, and I think what distressed me about each of these episodes, and there will be others that I can't really recall right now, but it's just how badly we discuss race in this place. I mean, just how impossible it is to have sensible, useful, let's move forward, how can we be better, how do we want to be type conversations around race in this country. And it so distressed me. And if I'm honest, I didn't actually have responses like, I'm going to make work. What my response has always been is like, how do I support my people with what I have? And yeah, it was how do I support my people? Because we're at war. I've always felt myself to be at war, and it's just sometimes that war comes to the surface and the rest of the time you can't see it. It's like a sort of submarine type war, so it's always going on under the surface, and every now and again something happens. You know, the football thing is really obvious. That's the kind of racism that people understand, but there's other kinds of racism that are less clear, and we are very bad at talking about those ones. But yeah, Deptford fire and the Stephen Lawrence thing, those got my blood burning, and I was like, yeah, I need to find money and distribute it to my people. That's kind of how that's where I go with that. It's quite raw, not very arty.
No, it's valid. It's completely powerful and valid. Lawrence, what about yourself?
Becoming a parent.
Becoming a parent
Was the most seismic. That was the biggest shift in my whole life. And it was Bristol. You grew up in the inner city of Bristol. Nothing's new. The George Floyd murder, it didn't shock me, it didn't surprise me. I got a graveyard here in Bristol, up over by French, by the UWE campus, that's full of young people, young thing, who've been killed and died through the neglect and the prejudice of the city. When my first son was born, an incident happened where my partner at the time was picking him up from nursery. On the front line then, I think you had, and this is no exaggeration, 150 to 200 people allowed to sell crack cocaine every single day of the week. A lot of people I grew up with were on the line. Somebody then approached my partner. I went to war with this on the streets. And then it was like, no, you're becoming part of the problem. How can this still be happening here? How can they be ignoring us? They've ignored us all your life. You can't keep ignoring for your child to end up possibly seeing that this line could be its opportunity to succeed in a city that doesn't want to give any access. And that was so one day when I was about to engage in an act that would probably result in either me not being here for my life being missing or me not being here by doing 25 years in prison. That's when I went home. I went home to get something, but for some reason I picked up a pen. And I wrote the very first poem I ever wrote in my life in 2003. And that was when it changed, because this had to change then. So people dying in America, don't mean to be blunt, they've been dying here my whole life. Why does it take for an act to be off our shores for people to want to act? Yeah. In the graveyard, which I'm talking about, one of the things that's horrific for me, I got 3 friends who were all murdered. And the graves are laid horizontally. But over time, it's ended up that the 3 of these graves are one behind the other. There's 5 years between these 2 graves, and there's 7 years before the next one. So between them all is 13 years. But they sit there in a row. None of this is new to me. None of this, like, even at the moment, people are triggered because of the football. Like, well, we've suffered that here all our life. People triggered about what? And now for a minute, it'll be a moment, but give it 2 weeks, it'll be over, right? Black Lives Matter. The other day, it was a moment, huge amount of people traveled. 10,000 people came to the first march. 500 went to the second one a month later, because they all got their snaps and loaded up on social media with a placard to say that I was part of something. The government said it's going to make changes. Now it's not a whole war against culture. Now it's saying that if you are aware of what's going on around you, you are woke. And now there's a woke war. But now everybody's not talking about that. Priti Patel woman is telling people, boo the supporters for them leading against racism. Next minute she's putting out a thing saying they're great. Yeah, the hypocrisy to catch the moment, but nobody's really in it for the movement. Yeah, but when you've suffered this continually, so that's what it was for me. My children couldn't be not seen, could not be not heard. So if that mean I had to stand up, yeah, so they didn't have to lay down. That was the moment for me.
Oh, thank you. We've talked a lot about kind of, you know, I guess the struggle, the fight against racism, and you know, you've all made work in lots of different kind of styles. And one thing that I think about even my own practice is that the representation of struggle and representations of slavery, people enslaved, versus then, you know, Samenua, you know, you're talking about your more recent project, which is kind of celebrating, you know, the elders, if you like, and that kind of thing. So how much are you aware? And I remember talking with you, Lawrence, as well, about, you know, cargo, you know, after that, you know, in terms of representation of slavery, and then there's other stories to tell. Do you know what I mean? So this representation of celebrating our existence and celebrating our survival versus showing those representations of struggle and fight and pain. How much are you aware of those balances? Do you know what I mean? And how much you know, where you see the future of your practices going in relation to those representations, or is that not something that particularly Samenua?
Yeah, hold on. Am I off mute? Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I actually, and this is just me, Samenua, personally, I struggle with is, I can't remember the woman that said it. I think she was somebody on Radio 1, but she said, you can't have our rhythm without our blues. And I struggle with the amount of our blues that we have to absorb. What I miss is the amount of joy in our communities and our need to correct the narrative. And that is absolutely valid and necessary, is a real thing. But part of the correction of that narrative is the absence of our joy. We are some of the most extraordinarily joyful people in the face of pain. And yet, if I'm living that pain, if I'm living that struggle, if I'm living those challenges on a day-to-day basis, when I come off my work beat and I flick on my TV or I want to hear a podcast or whatever, I don't want to hear more pain. So part of my practice is very much about, how can we come with the love? How do we bring the joy? How do we bring something that eases the wound of being 24/7 at war? And I am very interested in that and finding ways to support that, because I think when we met on Twitter, it was because we both had a similar feeling around that whole, somebody had posted something about decolonization and saying, is anybody thinking that decolonization is starting to feel like recolonization? And there was lots of laughter, and you put a blog post in the feed, and I read the blog post and I said, yeah, because we both inspired by Morrison's definition of racism, which is that it's a distraction. You're so busy proving that you're this and you're that, and you have no history. Yes, we have. Here it is. You have no this. Yes, we have. Here it is. You can't do that. Yes, we can. Watch us do it. And that it stops you from doing what you want to do, that sense of determination. And so it's important to me that even though the correction of the narrative is a deep part of my practice, is that I find ways to express the joy as well. That's an important thing for me.
Yeah, no, thank you. Lawrence, you're coming now.
I think you kind of hit something on the head, and that's why we designed Carved Classroom. I'm not interested in decolonizing somebody else's education system. I'd rather make one that's pure, inspiring, and beautiful. So I am going to share the screen briefly for 1 second, just so you can see the images of the 15 lesson plans that make up the current, what will be the current batch of lessons from Cargo Classroom, just so you can see how beautiful what you would normally think of is the 400 years, a little bit more, but the transatlantic slave trade narrative and the images we're used to seeing of people of African diaspora. So if I just quickly share the screen. I think it should be there. Is it this one up that you can see? If I go like that, can you see those images?
Yeah.
Let me just run through them. Right, I'm just cheap. The first one's me. Yeah, because this whole collection was built from a poem called I Wish, which I wrote in 2006. And actually, I'm going to quickly give it to you, sorry. But the poem goes like this. I wish as a boy growing up more of my history was shown. There was so much missing that could have helped me before I was grown. The history I was taught helped to fill me with anger and pain because it taught me my ancestors were slaves with no name, captured, kidnapped, traded, taken from their home. That's what I remember when my ancestors were shown. So when it came to history lessons, my interest was none, because whenever it covered my ancestors, they were savages and dumb. But many years after leaving school, my interest started to grow. And that is when I realized there was so much I didn't know. Much of what I was taught in school and told as facts was really like someone explaining your whole life on just one act. There is so much to be proud of, so much that's been achieved, but without going in search of the truth, I would have been deceived. From kings and queens that built great nations, to teachers and scholars that helped with our education. From people who stood up to what they saw was wrong, to people who risked their lives to help the sick get strong. From warriors that fought with so much pride, to all the people who for our cause died. These are just a few facts I learned that turned my anger to joy, and I just wish they were taught to me when I was a boy. And that is what this whole collection has been built, so that children can see what they come from, see who came before us, and the shoulders we are stood up on to have the freedoms we have today. So the next image is Imhotep, 5,000 years ago, the first architect, seen as the first physician, scientist, built the step pyramids. The next one's the merchants to Bristol put in context. But then we got Queen Nzinga, then we got Nanny the Maroons, then we got Dutty Bookman, Haitian Revolution, Paul Bogle, Samuel Shutt, Mary Seagull, Marcus Garvey, the Windrush generation, Carmen Beckford, Marvin Rees, Peaches Golden and Clear Lake. All of these people are still on the shoulders of who stood before them. I just want to show this is the history and what I want my children, other children to see, so that they can believe that anything is possible. I just wanted to share that. And that's why I'm not trying to decolonize someone else's curriculum. We'll write our own. We'll create our own. And if they want to use it, it's up to you. But I know who I know will be using this and are using it already.
No, thank you. Powerful poem as well. I'm glad you brought that in. Michael, I don't know if you had a reflection on that, on this question around the representation of pain and struggle versus joy.
Yeah, I think, the representation of pain, I mean, it is the narrative that we've been showed, isn't it? I mean, it's something that that's something that I've grown up with. I was born in 1988, and so it's been going on before me, and it's still going on now. So, the representation of pain is something that, this is the reason why, I wanted to get into media to change that representation, because, when I done the history on it, I looked at, the history of Black representation on TV or in media, and, I got to the black and white minstrel shows, which was still going on until 1978. This is anti-BBC, making a program which is Saturday night, TV, something like, akin to the X Factor nowadays, family viewing. And it was, called the Black and White Minstrel Shows. And, if you go back and you trace history, you can see how, our representation has been skewed, whether that is, as showing us as buffoonish or stereotypical, or whether it's just, showing criminality, and it's still a very popular, trope that is, that permeates media in general. So, that's the reason why I feel like, that's the reason why I decided to make, a production company, an independent production company, to then try and change these images and make different images of our people, because obviously the suffering and slavery is just a blip in our history. Obviously it definitely connects to us where we are now, but it's just a blip in it. And I feel like there's so much emphasis put on it. Maybe it's because we're in England, there's so much emphasis put on, what this country did, to make loads of money to build the empire that it's basically got now. So maybe that's why they only want to focus on, the slave trade, or, but I think the reason why, that's why it's so important for artists, that's why artists are so relevant, to put out those different images, to get you to just drop a little seed in you that can hopefully grow and flourish into something where you see the nuance in society, and you see the nuance in our history, because again, everybody needs to understand the nuances of history, and you know, and that goes across the board for all different people, however you define yourself. History is nuanced, and the problem is we forget that.
No, thank you. Our last question before I open it up to the audience really is, again, you know, Lawrence touched on it there, you know, like not wanting to decolonize in other people's spaces, want to create our own pure spaces, and that's exactly what we're talking about with Samenua in the blog. That's the thing that brought us together. So these things like, yeah, decolonizing the curriculum, decolonizing the museum, you know, we've talked a lot about the Colston moment, and as you say, with the Black Lives Matter movement, which obviously predated George Floyd, but at the same time, you know, as we say, Black lives and Black murder's been happening for a long time. But how have, you know, what's been, I guess, what's it been like as artists, as creative producers, doing this work that's predated a lot of these new terms into the Black Lives Matter decolonization, but now all of a sudden people are interested, people are let me qualify that, they're putting up they're showing symbols of interest, whether that's sincere interest or not, that's another conversation. But you know, the black squares, decolonization, all these kind of things. So what's that been like for you? Has that been frustrating that all of a sudden there's this renewed interest, or actually has it been liberating? You know, there's a question in there somewhere, but I think you know where I'm coming from, really.
Yeah, I'm a bursting on this one. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in, guys. Sorry. But for me, it has been painful because I see it as a way of white organizations and institutions securing resources for themselves to do something that they believe is for others. So, and a prime example of this was I was called by the wonderful Lucy, who I had mentioned earlier, who was excited about a fund. She's like, Samenua, it's for diversity and digital and and museums. Diversity, museums, digital, this is your bag. Go for this fund. I was like, yeah, I'm on it. Thanks, Lucy. Sent me the link, looked on it. And I, as an individual, can become a member of the Museums Association, but Museum of Colour cannot, because even though we are building it as a museum, digital museums cannot become accredited museums. So Museum of Colour cannot become a museum. That fund was only eligible for, you were only eligible for it if you were an accredited museum. What this meant, and I had to spell it out to somebody the other day, you have ignored this for so long that I'm taking stuff into my own hands, other people are taking things into their own hands, but you find money to do this for yourselves that we cannot access. Is this what you mean by Black Lives Matter? That's just one example. I could give you many. Now, it doesn't mean that that work shouldn't happen and that that work is not important. It absolutely is. But it is the imbalance of resources. And if we're going to talk about resources, we have to acknowledge, especially because this is a Bristol-centric event, and anybody of African Caribbean descent that is a taxpayer in this country has been paying slave owners up until 2015, because that was when we last stopped paying that debt, because you know what happened then. And so so resources are incredibly important, especially the resources of the public purse that we all pay into. So for me, the drive towards diversity and decoloniality, while those are good, honorable, important things, they are skewing the distribution of resources to the place where the majority of the resources have always been. And that is a crime. Sorry, I knew I had to
Thank you. And yeah, you added to my list, equality, inclusion, diversity, added to the list of decolonization.
And it will be called something else 10 years from now.
Exactly. No, thank you. Lawrence, I don't know if you want to come in on this.
I think Samir kind of summed a lot of it up, and a lot of what's actually going on is how can they keep control of a narrative to protect their space and keep the status quo exactly how it is, to keep the control they want. Like, people ask me why I don't vote. I don't vote, I don't see anything in voting for a system that when it was put in place of my ancestors as property. And they're just trying to hold that position to keep control of what they kept control from all the way along. I've engaged with some of the universities, some of the spaces, looking at it like they're acting today, that they're surprised that these things have happened. Yeah, Bristol was surprised a decade ago, it surprised 20 years ago, it surprised 40 years ago, and nothing's really changing. They're keeping at it. So my only way that you can see to make the changes independently. Why would anybody in their right sense want to give up control and power? Yeah, and that's the reality. That's the hard bit. That's the hard and the bitter pill to swallow. But independently, we can be the change. We can make a difference. A digital museum to me is so much better than a museum stuck in one part of one city in a corner somewhere. That only if you go to that city you can find it. A digital museum, you can see it can be accessed globally. Because of the blockage of institutions, that's why we're building digital institutions. Cargo's got one website. The Cargo classroom resources are available. We make sure they are free to use. No one is paying to access these resources because we want to remove as many barriers as possible away from learning and improving our position. I think the digital space has caught everybody out. I think the ability to be able to connect to 1 billion people rather than, if you're lucky, 1 million people in a year coming through your building. There's a massive seismic change. I think we shouldn't go back believing that the old knowns and the old ways are the way to move forward. There's brand futures, even with TV. My children, my oldest son's 29. He doesn't watch the telly. My 22-year-old knows what a telly is just to access the internet, YouTube. My 17, none of them know what BBC One, 2, ITV Channel 4 is, but they watch people that broadcast digitally that have, I watched some of the videos, they got 1 billion views. We were told the other day 34 billion views was massive for this football match. That's a standard music video on the internet nowadays. Yeah, there's a way to connect and make this difference, but it's not through the old channels. I'm not concerned what the institutions do. Do what you're doing, because what you're doing, you're old, you're stale, you're mainly pale, and you're dinosaurs, and they became extinct. That's kind of, I think it's exciting right now. That's what I'm trying to say. And even though I get passionate and then I might seem angry, trust me, I've never had so much fun in my whole life. Seeing the opportunities that are out here right now and having the fun. Honestly, I'm living the best life that I could not have even dreamed was possible.
Mm-hmm. Michael.
Yeah, I think, going forward, yeah, I mean, just with what this space that we're creating, I think it's not about, I suppose we're not really looking for permission. I think that's what it's about. I think that's the difference with, the generations coming through. I mean, because, of the resource that we have, as in the internet and being connected with people, naturally we're not gonna look to the old norms. So, over the next, 20 years, because it's a long game, it's a long process. And I think over the next 20 years, I think we're going to see more and more people doing things, their own initiatives and not having to wait to be given permission.
Thank you. Got a question in the chat by Linda, specifically asking a question about a specific organisation. I want to try and broaden it out slightly so it's not as specific, but basically like organisations that are housed in, spaces that are connected with transatlantic slavery and colonialism. What do you see as do you see a responsibility for those types of organisations that still exist today? Whether they've existed from way back then or whether they're using spaces that are connected with slavery and colonialism. Do you see? Do you look at modern day organisations as a responsibility to be putting, to be owning up, to be doing initiatives, these kind of things, or does it come back to that decolonization position of they do what they do, I'm going to do what I do? What do modern day organizations responsibility have? I guess is the question, if any, particularly within the arts and culture.
I think these modern day organizations, places like museums and there's places which are just historically, disconnected from certain communities. And I think because some of these organizations are funded through, taxpayers' money, which is obviously our money. So they have a duty to be, obtainable and, being able to be open for everybody. I feel like that's their responsibility, and I feel like I just can't get caught up in these big old institutions, and how they move, because everything takes too long. It's very slow, as and we saw that with the plaque, because I was filming when they were making the plaque to go onto the statue, and that process was just took so long. So you know, you can try democratic routes, but certain things need no radical action, and that is just the bottom line. So I don't know. I mean, it's their responsibility to be open and, you know, to fit their remits, and I think that goes for all institutions. But because there's, you know, a certain type of culture at these institutions, it's gonna take a long time for these ideas to die out, unfortunately. And that, you know, and as next generations move on, you know, that's when you're going to see more changes with these institutions, because they are set in their way. And I don't know, I just haven't got the energy to really think about how to help them, really. I think we've got to create for our own and be an example for the next generations, so they can see that, you know, that things are possible, you know, things are possible, and you can, you know, anything is really possible if you've got the right focus, you know.
Lawrence, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I think I kind of like take a line, and you should know this line, Shawn. Seeing you connect with Fairfield House and everything, like what Marcus Garvey said over 100 years ago. Don't look for what others can do for you, look for what you can do for yourself. I live by that, because denied access is all I've ever known. And like I said, we have the abilities. We are so powerful and able, but we have been told that we're not, but we actually are. And once we take that actually on board and stop taking this victimhood mentality and actually looking at what we can achieve and then connect together, yeah, you'll be surprised how quick change can come. I don't care what the institutions do. Do what you're doing. I don't give up, yeah? Honestly, I don't care about you. I care about you as much as you care about me. Yeah, let's just leave it like that, yeah? And I'm working with some incredible people. And what I see in the youth, what I see in the young people, like, they've just got a we can do attitude now. It's different to anything we come from. So I try not to pass the prejudice or fears that were around me growing up, because they haven't got them there. And I'll just use an example. Like, we've literally got a child leading this huge green ecological campaign, this young girl, yeah, that's act like, in my day, you'd have been told, shut up, you get moved. Over, there's no campaign, you ain't got no voice. But the young are seeing the voices of other young people and what they're pushing, even those that 10,000 people that came to Bristol, yeah, that's 4 kids that brought them in, off the back of what was over there. The grown-ups were all scared to address it until something happened. The statue fell, and that allowed people to have a voice that they didn't have before, because they were scared to have the voice. But if there's a moment, let's do it. Yeah, the institutions, carry on being who you are. You're stuffy, you're old, and you're boring. Yeah, we can make the difference ourselves, and that's what we got. Like, that's what people have to know. And the truth is, people are making that. It's like, we are making the difference. People are making the difference. All the music artists I know, they're not being robbed by this and that. They've created their own companies, their own labels. They're millionaires. I know loads of millionaires. I didn't know loads of black millionaires growing up. There's lots of black millionaires and billionaires now. So we can even look at them in the sense the half empty or the half full. But trust me, the glass is overflowing. By a lot of that places, if they say we're fading, they can get government signed money. So they keep talking us down, what we're doing to get free money. So a lot of them I just call intellectual benefit cheats. Because you're cheating us of the benefits we've already created for ourselves by talking us down to get the free. Let's go out and work for what we want. If I got to do 110 meters hurdles, or someone's got to do a 10-meter sprint, you think I'm still not going to do the 110-meter hurdles to achieve what I need to achieve? Yeah, honestly, we are so powerful. We are so powerful. We are so great. Please let us just recognize that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing I think about, you know, whether it's anti-apartheid movement, civil rights struggle, how our struggles within African heritage communities and diaspora inspired the world, inspired the Polish uprising, inspired so many different.
They be our triumphs, not our struggles. You see the language.
Yeah.
Our triumphs have created change. Yeah, while we've been in the struggle.
Absolutely.
I just want to say something in a slightly different angle about the arts world, arts and heritage world, but especially the arts world. Basically, they've been talking for too long. So those institutions, they've just been talking for too long. That whole game about, oh, we need to diversify this with writing another report, having another conference, we're like, we're so done. For me, Black Lives Matter is not about white people understanding that we matter. It's about us owning how we matter. And it's about us caring less about what they think about us. So for my generation and older generation, in terms of value and what people and needing to be seen and recognized by, because the European lens was the most important lens in the arts world. And we didn't think what we thought of things mattered. But now we're understanding that we do. And so we are giving ourselves value, and therefore we're able to make strides. And that shift has happened, but the arts world and the heritage world has not caught up with that shift. And the most interesting demonstration of that is not actually arts, it is sport, and it is Naomi Osaka and the decision that she took this year to not play the French Open and to not play Wimbledon because she wanted to take care of herself. What is important about that is that Naomi Osaka doesn't need the traditional press. She has 1 million followers. If she wants to speak to people, she will speak to them. She doesn't need newspapers to talk to. So, and also Naomi Osaka is a combination of the African diaspora and the East Asian diaspora in one young, powerful, extraordinary woman. So even if you want to think in terms of commodity, which we cannot escape, she is the future and she doesn't need them. And for all the Grand Slam tournaments to get together and decide to throw shade on a young tennis player, that's because of fear. And that's okay. We can see it and we're fine.
No, thank you. I mean, yeah, I mean, that reminded me in terms of even the language of activism, how we're now talking about, you know, rest as a form of activism and self-care as a form of activism. The whole, and it, you know, relates back to what you're talking about. Is in terms of, you know, quiet activism, these different kind of, you know, activism exists in the everyday, you know, and I got a hail up here. My PhD student, Liz Crow, who's doing work, her study is on quiet activism and looking at activism through a different lens. Got a question here by Annie Lily Green, hailing you all up for the powerful speaking and contributions you've made. And a question about young artists and creatives who want to engage in activism, and what advice would you give? And forgive me, Annie, I also want to just add to this. I remember, I won't mention a name, but I remember in my university seeing a Black young creative, and she, you know, she had posters all over the corridor about this Black project, and she wanted, you know, models for it, etc. And I got speaking to her. I didn't know, she wasn't on my course. I didn't know her before. And so I was just interested in the project, got speaking to her. And I said, oh yeah, what other projects have you done looking at Black identity while you've been on the course? And she said, this is the first one. And I was like, okay, fine. But she was in the 3rd year. And she said that she didn't do it in the 1st and 2nd year because she felt embarrassed. She was the only Black person in her class. And, you know, just did she thought other people's, the eyes would roll, or a Black student doing a Black topic. And my heart broke at that point. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, as Black artists, we shouldn't be forced to do it. But if you want to do it, we should be doing it without apology as well. You know, so it can take a certain amount of confidence for young people to even, you know, present themselves and to present their voice in that way, really, which, you know, that really stayed with me, that conversation. So I just wanted to, you know, with Annie's question, just wanted to add that anecdote that actually for young creatives, it's not always easy to enter the activist space. So what advice would you give to young people in that context, if that's what they wanted to do with their practice? Yeah, loads.
Don't call yourself an activist. Just be an artist and do your work.
Yeah.
They put the label of activist on us to try to make what we're doing negative or aggressive. Yeah, I don't call myself an activist. Don't want to call me an activist. I say, well, you know, I just tell people, all I tell people is I'm a poet. That's the only label I want. I'm a storyteller and a poet. If my work creates change, or the actions is doing change, whether the actions of the work is doing change. So that question is like, what is an activist? What is it? It's something that can be attacked for trying to, like, so I would say to them, don't call yourself an activist, be an artist, yeah? Do your art, let your art speak for you. As I said before, and especially Bristol. Bristol's definitely a city of conversations over action. Yeah, so you'll be amazed at how much you could get done just by acting. But the activist title tag, other people can have that. Yeah, don't take that on and don't call yourself it. Yeah, because that's the only advice I can give to you. Yeah, be the artist. If you want to be a creative, do your work, let your work talk for you. And when people say, are you an activist? I'm an artist. Then ask them what an activist is.
Yeah, nice one. Thank you. Michael.
I think, you've got to find what you're passionate about. You've got to find what is the thing that, you really want to change. And then, using your artistic, output, then that's how you address it. You address it in that way. And I feel like, everybody can do their part when it comes to the arts. And I mean, the arts does play a role. I mean, you've got other roles, people that want to get into politics, people that want to get into finance, people that want to get into all these different institutions. And we need all these people as well. Because in a small way, that is their activism in a small way. So I think if you're an artist wanting to become an activist, then I think it's just really all about you finding out what is the key thing that you're passionate about, and then using your artistic, talents to highlight it. And the beautiful thing is you've got all different types of, things that you can do to actually highlight issues, especially in this digital age that we're in now. So I think it's a great time to get your voice heard, because that's what activism is really all about: getting your voice heard, getting your community's voice heard.
Thank you. And as someone who was questioning whether they're an activist or not, I'm going to let someone last word on this.
Come in. Okay, I'm really lucky because I've spent the last 6-7 months talking to artists. So what Respect Due did is it asked artists to nominate somebody who they wanted to pay public respect to, who they wished more people knew about. And then we've created a remote portrait because it was been done through COVID. But we've also talked to all of these people who've been nominated. And one of the questions was, what advice would you give to young artists coming through now? So I'm only going to give a couple, but one was from Gary Crosby, which was the last image that I showed on my slides, who's a double bassist and an amazing person. And he said, hone your craft. Mm-hmm. Hone your craft. Practice, do the work, put in the hours, dedicate yourself to being the best artist you can be. That is your activism. Many of them said something very similar, and I feel exactly the same way. But one thing I would add to that is about self-trust. So a writer once said to me, because I was like, oh, I've written something, but I'm not happy with it. He said, right, you have to listen to your inner quiet voice. You were a reader before you were a writer. You know what is good writing. You know it. There's a part of you that knows it. And when you do it, you know. So it's to grow and cultivate confidence in your inner voice and aspire to the best, because you know what it is. And that's what you reach for. That's what you try to hone. So it is the two things, because the confidence does take time, but listen to yourself. What speaks to you? What do you find beauty in? What is your aesthetic? What inspires you? And listen to your own voice as you create whatever your art form is, and trust it. So that is one of the most successful artists I know, has never received a grant from the Arts Council or any other arts funding body, and he shows his work successfully all over the world. But over here, they don't want to fund him. He knows who he is. He lives and breathes his art. So become brilliant at your art. That's my advice.
Thank you. Powerful. Just want to thank you and Michael, Lawrence, all three of you. Fantastic. I'm going to be watching this back and taking notes myself. It's really powerful. So thank you for the contributions and all your insights and your generosity. So thank you. Before people go, I just want to flag up the event that we have next week, which is Black Females in STEM, Science Technology. So Andrecraft Johnson and Dr. Emanuela Dukwu They're going to be the chairs, facilitators of that event, and 3 incredible, inspiring speakers for that. So I will put the link in the chat to book for that one. So please do come along to that, and just look out for other events that we'll be running in the future. So again, I just want to thank Samenua, Michael, Lawrence, just thank you so much. It's been really, I've got so many more questions, but I got to let you go. I got to let the people go. but there's just so much. So thank you again, and thank you all in the audience for your contributions and for listening. And I know that this is going to be one that we're thinking about. We're going to be waking up and thinking about certain things as well. So I will end here, and I have to do that Zoom thing where I have to end meeting and cut us all adrift. But I'll leave the chat up, because I know people are writing their thanks. But thank you very much, all of you.